We'll call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'll take a motion to move into non-public. Okay, Leah, that was moved by Vincent Paul and a second by Dawn to go into non-public. And so now I'll take the roll for that. Alexandria, Bridgewater,
Yes.
Bristol,
Yes.
Danbury, yes. Groton,
Yes.
Hebron,
Yes.
New Hampton. Yes. Okay. So at 6:02, we'll go into non-public.
There is a meeting back to order. We have returned from non-public session. It is now 7:05 p.m. and we are now at item 5 on the agenda, which is for the approval or modification of the agenda as presented. Is there a preference?
Would you like to add something?
What do you have in mind?
I would like to talk about the Project Promise for next year.
Project Promise. We're going to do that following the presentation by Barrett Christina. Okay. So we are going to put that in as item 7B. As an agenda item. And is there any objection? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and modify the agenda. Sue, did you have something you wanted to change?
Yeah, I would like to add also the scheduling at the middle school for this coming year, and recess being a part of that too. Subject.
Item 7C. Recess and scheduling at the middle school. Any objection? Good. Hearing none, we now have items 7A, B, and C to cover. At this point, we are at Item 6, which is a presentation by Jesse Austin, who had a rather unique experience this past year in DC, and I'd like to turn the meeting over to Jesse and have him share with us that experience. We're glad you're here.
Yes, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much for allowing me to tell you about my trip. Let's see, while I have this put together, let me tell you a little bit about what the trip was about. So, the reason in which the program stands is because it's hosted by the Hearst Foundation, which is a group that sponsors the United States Senate Youth Program, which has been going for 52 years now. It's basically a program in which 2 students from each state, junior or senior, public or private, boy or girl, are selected on behalf of the state to go down to the Capitol and meet with a whole group and diverse leaders, including the president and their senators. There are, as I said, 2 from each state, and there's also 2 from DC and from some district, military districts, so that equals 104 delegates from all around the nation. It's a really great experience because how it works is that it's basically, you're chosen on the credentials of leadership, service, character, and your academics, which is very similar to National Honor Society. And it's very selective, having to choose between 2 students in the state to take part in this program. A big deciding factor is also their interest in pursuing public administration, government, social service, which evidently I would like to pursue as my future career. Thank you. So here are just a couple pictures that I have here. I think one of the greatest parts about this experience is really the people, because you know how they say religion, politics, and everything under the sun you're not supposed to really talk about? Well, we crossed that line quite a few times here in DC. Everyone has a completely interesting perspective because they come from different political, social backgrounds, and we would be meeting all the time as individuals and getting to talk with everybody and learning so much about what it's like for them in their state, politically, socially, and getting to kind of compare between ourselves and them. We also had military mentors who were selected on similar reasons. Mine was Captain Yuan Ho. He's in the right picture on the left. They were absolutely great. They would basically kind of monitor a select group of people. The one on the right is who my group was. And they were very inspirational, very wise, and I learned an awful lot about them from them. And as I said, we did get to meet with our senators, and that was something that I was really looking forward to when I found out that I was going to be selected for this program. This is Kelly Ayotte. She was the first person that I met at the Senate reception. We met for about 7 minutes. She didn't really have an awful lot of time to really meet with us, but we were able to ask her questions, and one of the questions I asked her was what were some issues that she sees facing my generation, and how we're going to eventually have to overcome them. She mentioned two things, one of which being our financial situation in our economy, which seems to be an obvious factor, but something that kind of surprised me at the moment, but when I thought more about it, not so much of a surprise, was education. Because that's something that is definitely impacting our generation, how it's kind of always changing and of that sort. Also, Lee Stagnan was the other New Hampshire delegate. She's from, she lives in Litchfield, which is near Concord, and I don't remember the high school, kind of off the top of my head, sorry. We also met with Senator Jean Shaheen. She was another very interesting person to me because, I mean, depending on your political views, I really don't think it matters because really just meeting any leader in particular with such status and such a seemingly successful career is always an awe-inspiring thing and interesting thing to do and meet. Now, I didn't have the opportunity to ask her questions, but she did bring her interns with her, which was very interesting to learn from them and kind of see what it's like to work on the side of a senator. And another big thing that everyone's always asking me about the trip was, did I get to meet the president? And the truth is, yes, I did get to meet the president. It might be kind of hard to see in the picture, but he is right in the middle. This is inside the White House. He basically talked to us, commending us on our hard work and basically giving us kind of confidence in what we want to pursue in the future in regards to public policy, government. He also talked about three very interesting things, the first of which being our relations with Russia, which is still, even right now, kind of an issue going on right here in the world. In addition, he also talked about how optimism seems to be kind of lacking in society, which I think was a very interesting thing to hear from our world leader, our national leader. Sorry. And we were also well taken care of here in DC. We had awesome food, and these are just some of the pictures I took that I thought were very interesting. So you didn't have to worry about anything like that. So it was well fed, well taken care of. We were at the Mayflower Hotel. This was an entire week experience that we got to spend in Washington, going to a whole bunch of places, meeting a whole bunch of really interesting leaders in our capital. Such leaders including the one at the top, Madame Lagarde, who is the head of the IMF and also running for president of France. On the left is Secretary Sean Donovan, who is the secretary under the president for Housing and Urban Development. I really liked getting to hear from him because he talked about how something that I'm going to mention at the end of this presentation, something that really stuck with me throughout this entire trip. We also talked to people like Associate Attorney General Tony West down at the bottom. We even got to meet the head of C-SPAN, and we met with several senators in different locations, different places, and they basically all talked about what they do in DC and their advice to us. As I alluded to earlier, we did go to a whole bunch of really interesting places, such as the NASA headquarters in DC, the Rotunda. We also went to the Supreme Court. We got to talk to Justice Scalia, who is one of the justices known to be kind of a very interesting personality, and I think that kind of showed when we got to talk to him. We also went to places like Mount Vernon, and if you see in the top right, we are having dinner inside the National Archives, which I think not very many people could say. It's a very interesting experience to do. And while I'm thinking about that, I also have a couple things to pass around, including the yearbook photo of all the delegates, my journal, and itinerary, as well as the official certificate of completion in which we all got and were signed by our senators. I will pass to you guys.
How long was this, Justin?
This was a week-long program, so it took place from March 8th to the 15th. In addition, we also went to several memorials, such as the 9/11 memorial at the Pentagon. We went to see Washington's gravesite, Kennedy's gravesite. We went to Arlington. We saw the change in Liquid Guard and the laying of the wreath. And down at the bottom left, which I thought was a very inspiring and very thought-provoking memorial, was the 9/11 memorial. That is one of the surviving tops of the World Trade Center, and next to that is a wall with headlines, all from the September 11, 2001. It was very humbling to go to all these places, really, because I've been to some of these before for my 8th grade trip, but going here in this context with kind of representing the state of New Hampshire was really a much different experience, and when I went to these places, it definitely had a lot more of a powerful impact. We also had a lot of interesting experiences. We went to go see a live orchestra at the Performing Kennedy Arts Center. We had 2 dances at the Mayflower Hotel, in which we stayed at. We went to the art gallery, art Smithsonian, and one of the places that I fondly remember is the State Department, where ambassadors and people from all around the world would come together to negotiate things. And as I was just talking to some people earlier, they have really interesting things just kind of laying around in the State Department. The middle one on the bottom, that piece of paper is the Treaty of Paris, for those familiar with their history. And there's also Thomas Jefferson's desk that was in there. Things like King George III's globe just in the corner. So very interesting to get to see those places. And the one next to that on the right is known as the Benjamin Franklin Room, where ambassadors and representatives from different countries would come and eat and socialize with each other. And we got to eat there too, so that was a very neat experience. And in conclusion and in reflection, I think one of the greatest things that I learned from this entire experience was that it doesn't matter who you are or what your status or job is in society, because I firmly believe that we all have the ability to take what we have and use it to benefit and help others. And that's something that really stuck with me throughout the entire experience, and that's something that I definitely want to promote and live out as I continue my life and continue the public service. And with that, if there are any questions that you guys would like for me to answer for me. Yes, on?
I worked for the Government Accountability Office for 20 years. I was wondering if you got to talk to any of the auditors that work for Congress.
Specifically, I'm not sure. I don't think we because some of the people we met like currently held offices, but then there were ones who used to hold offices. I wish I remembered his name, but there was someone who served on the judicial, someone who served in the executive, and someone who served in the legislative branch throughout his career, all three. So that was very interesting. We did get to talk to the head parliamentarian, people like even the Senate historian, which I wasn't even aware was an actual position in government. But sorry, I guess I cannot recall what was it.
It's not surprising. They didn't always listen to us.
Are you a senior?
I am currently a junior, but I will be a senior as of this next school year.
And I would add that so you were the only junior in the state who's ever been chosen as a junior to do this program.
Why do you think you were chosen, Joseph?
Sometimes I feel like I have to ask myself that a lot, because I admit when I was given this opportunity, the pamphlet, to sign up for this wonderful experience a week before it was due, I was thinking to myself, you know, if I'm selected, it's going to mean the world to me. And if I'm not selected, I think the fact that I'm trying to pursue this is something memorable and commendable in itself. In fact, I really thought because I was a public school junior that I would be at a disadvantage to seniors who had more experience than me in private schools. It seemed that everyone kind of seems to feel like they definitely have it better than everyone else. And then when I did find out that I was selected, I was really amazed. And when I talked to my principal about it, one of the things they mentioned to me was that they really admired my humility about the situation. And they also admired all the things that I've been able to accomplish as a junior. And that really stood out to them, and I feel that those are two attributing factors to what got me a spot on this wonderful experience.
Well, I'm extremely impressed and proud that you were chosen, and you're very well spoken, and I can see that you're making yourself a very good future. So good luck.
Yes, thank you very much.
Were there any other places in Washington that you have noted that you would like to visit in the future?
Oh, yes. Let's see.
Did you go to the Bureau of Printing and Engraving?
No, we did not, but we did go to something called a museum, which is a museum based on journalism and broadcast history, which is where the 9/11 memorial was with the remaining spire to the World Trade Center. It was basically, like I said, a journalism, news reporter related history museum. So there was an old printing press there. There were title pages from way back in the 1900s, 1800s, even 1700s, just in this long aisle. There was also, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the movie Anchorman, but they had an entire exhibit just on that one too. So they had props from the movie, and it's just, I was kind of thinking about, well, broadcast history, I guess you wanted to include that too. But I think what was so cool was that they had some really funny things like Anchorman, but also some really heavy, serious stuff like 9/11. And there's also a whole section dedicated to just JFK's legacies and his life. There was also a very interesting memorial I saw, which was for people who had died doing their journalistic duties overseas. And there was this entire wall of photos with people, and I was really surprised to see so many there. And if I'm right, I think it was made by Hillary Clinton, personally sponsored by her. Yeah, so it was a really interesting place. I wasn't exactly expecting much. It's like, oh, news, history, but it really was something really big, and that's something I'll always remember, and I don't think I really got to see everything there, so I would love to see that again. There's also all the Smithsonian's. I mean, one day in the Smithsonian, 2 hours in the Smithsonian really isn't enough to really absorb everything that's there. I mean, there's so many Smithsonian's between like history, natural history, even the post-making one. I would definitely love to see those when I get the chance in the future.
A week just doesn't cut it, but you were certainly given a unique perspective on those that we know.
Yes.
Who would you say, or do you have a favorite? Who's your most who's your favorite person, the person that you would look up to the most if that held public office, say a president, or it could be some other?
Pastor president.
I would say both, either. Both.
Let's see, well, if the picture doesn't say much, I'd say that Thomas Jefferson has always been someone that really interested me because he was somebody who had so many talents and was able to utilize them all in little ways to really help people. Between like drafting the Declaration and serving as a president and also in all of his contributions to the United States, the Louisiana Purchase, and even some of his faults. He's definitely has a big list of faults, but I think when I look at those faults, I also feel like that's what kind of reminds us that even our great founding fathers were human as well. And I think that sometimes, I was reading a really good book about that, in which sometimes people really idolize people, but at the same time, when you realize that they're human too, you kind of have a new insight on people. And I always find myself really inspired by Thomas Jefferson, his life and his legacies, even though some of his legacies haven't exactly lasted as long as he wanted, but still. Currently, I don't know, I guess I'm just someone that I find it hard to really find somebody with that much depth anymore, it seems. But hopefully, when I move on, I will find somebody like that, a modern Thomas Jefferson.
So you can be that.
Lord willing.
Well, we're certainly thankful that you had the opportunity to go and represent the state of New Hampshire, and we're proud of you here at Newfound for having done so. I'm very pleased that you spent the time to tell us about your trip. I was very anxious to hear about it personally. I'm sure the rest of them did yours as well, and I'm sure we all enjoyed it.
I'm jealous, actually.
Yeah, we got a lot of those too.
Congratulations.
Yes, and thank you very much. Your support has been very helpful as well. Yes, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Have a great senior year.
And change the world, guys.
Just one step at a time. You'll have to do that.
We're assigning you that task.
It's never too late.
Okay, just as a reminder, for those of you who have just tuned in, Ruby Hill had called the meeting to order this evening and attended the non-public and fell ill, so she asked me to run the meeting. And at this point, we're at section 7 on our agenda, 7A, which is a presentation by Barrett Christina of the New Hampshire School Board Association. And Barrett's going to talk to us about a number of things this evening, focusing on social media outlets. I also hope that we will have an opportunity to just have a give and take Q&A, if we will, for the time. So we're glad to have you here, Barrett.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be back again. Newfound Board is always kind enough to invite me up. It seems like once a year for the last handful of years. I made 10 copies, that should be enough. I've got 4 handouts here. I'm going to hand out 2 to start our conversation, and then I'll hand out 2 at the end, which I think will prove my point. In talking with Stacy, she asked me to come up and just give, I don't know if it'll be brief, but I think a pretty simple presentation on use of social media and how individual board members can use social media sort of in their more private lives, and some of the things that you need to be mindful of and remember, you know, when you're posting things on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, you know, really social media in the broadest possible sense. I don't think my presentation, you know, is going to take too long. I think most of this generally falls in line with sort of the general roles and responsibilities that I know a handful of the board members have heard me speak about, either at trainings I've done for the Newfound Board or statewide trainings that we've done down in Concord that I know some of you have attended on a somewhat regular basis. So the first handout that you should probably look at, that I think I'll be working from, is the one from the Texas Association of School Boards Social Media Guidelines for School Board Members. The great thing about working for the New Hampshire School Boards Association is that we are sort of we have a lot of sister organizations, if you will. So when a topic like this comes up, if I haven't prepared specific materials, I can do a quick search on the National School Boards Association website or reach out to colleagues in other state school boards associations, and chances are someone's put together a policy or a legal guidance document that I can annex, I guess, for lack of a better word, for purposes of some of the training. So I'm just going to read, some of the quick bullet points, and then we'll tie this back around to the second document that I think should make sense in terms of basic policy standards that boards generally adhere to and you probably have in place, and certainly falls in line with some of the general training that NHSBA puts forth and recommendations we put forth in terms of general boardsmanship and general sort of rules of operation now that you become a school board member. In social use, so I'll just read the bullet points going through and then we can open this up for questions either at the end or as we go along. In using social media to communicate about school district business, school board members should, 1, clarify that you are communicating as an individual member of the board and not as an official district spokesperson. And we talk about that quite a bit in our roles and responsibilities training, that individual school board members really have no inherent authority or power beyond what is specifically delegated to them by the board or beyond the context of the board acting as a whole at a duly called meeting. The second one, avoid deliberating school district business with a quorum of the board. For those of you that have attended some of the roles and responsibilities training and right to know law training that the School Boards Association puts forth, a big piece of our training these days is about electronic communication and school board use of email and some of the concerns and pitfalls that may invoke. If you've got a quorum of the board communicating via electronic means outside of the context of a duly called meeting, chances are you've created a meeting by having a quorum of the board communicating. And if you're going to have a meeting, the basic things need to happen. You need to post it, obviously. Post notice of the meeting needs to be made open to the public, and what's the other one? Minutes need to be taken. So obviously, if you have a quorum of the board communicating electronically, whether it's email, Facebook, presumably text messages, you run the risk of running afoul of the right to know law, and that's certainly nothing that any school board wants to do. 3, direct complaints or concerns presented online to the appropriate administrator. From my experience in getting calls from school board members, school board chairs, or administrators, when there's been use of social media in the community, that's generally where the concern falls in, is that the concern or complaint is not being directed back to the appropriate person within the school district. Again, in part with our roles and responsibilities training, and in part with what we recommend as best practice in terms of school board policy, you probably have a policy that creates a chain of command or a chain of communication for addressing concerns, complaints, right? Bring it up with the teacher or the staff member involved. If you're not satisfied, if the parent or the member of the public isn't satisfied with the resolution there, then maybe take it up to the building principal, then maybe to the superintendent, and if it's an appropriate matter within the school board's purview, you can give the person an audience, or if it relates directly to school board business, they can petition the board or ask the board to be placed on the agenda. There are other mechanisms in place, I think, is the biggest key, rather than a school board member typing out on Facebook or a tweet or whatnot. I'll look into this and get back to you. Well, as an individual school board member, we get back to the roles and responsibilities. You may not have any particular authority to look into the issue, or the issue may not even be an issue between the parties resolved. I hear stories all the time. Johnny's in 2nd grade, comes home, he's upset. They were picking on me on the playground. Mom calls the teacher. Kid never told the teacher. Kid wasn't upset at school, but thinking about it at the end of the day, the kid got upset. So if you're a school board member and you call your superintendent and say, Johnny got picked on and what's the teacher doing about it? Well, it's a good example that the teacher may not even have known it's a problem. So work within the context of our policies that create that chain of communication and the chain of command, if you will, in resolving issues and concerns within the school district. 4, I think is an important aspect as well too. Avoid posting content that indicates you have already formed an opinion on pending matters. When something happens in a school district in communities, small communities across New Hampshire, we know about it. Teachers suspended or disciplined. Even though we hold those, the board holds those conversations in the context of a non-public session, people talk, there's no avoiding that. But remember that as a school board member, if there's a particular issue that has even the slightest possibility or potential of coming to the board as a hearing, staff discipline, staff non-renewal, dismissal, a grievance under a collective bargaining agreement, where the board's going to be sitting as an adjudicative body, as a hearings officer, if you will, you need to come into that basically free of prejudice and free of bias. And your decision needs to be made only on the evidence that's presented to you at that particular hearing. So if you go on social media and say, my kid told me what happened, we need to get rid of this teacher, and you're a sitting school board member, you just tainted yourself, you possibly tainted the school board, and that's going to complicate the hearings process. Clear on that? 5, I think we talked about this, ask for community input to be provided through appropriate channels, but do not allow your social network to direct your decisions as a trustee. I think that combines bullet points 3 and 4 that we just talked about. Post content that the district has already released to the public. I'm going to give you a real life example that I was dealing with maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. There was a school board, and I'll use this in context without giving it away who it was, I'll use this within the context of an SAU. There was an issue going on within the central office. One school board received a letter from its attorney, but another school board within the SAU thought that maybe it wanted to receive an opinion from its own lawyer, all right? So I got calls back and forth. I said, before we post anything online, before we make it in public, before we provide any copies of any letters to any attorneys, or to the press, first contact the lawyer that wrote the letter and ask if they think that there's anything private or confidential that shouldn't be posted, or what the scope of their attorney-client privilege is, right? And I said before we get into a back and forth, he said, she said in the media or on social media, in the newspaper, on Facebook, about, competing interests within this SAU. Let's maybe everybody agree to hold off and let's see what this other lawyer says, and then we can sit down and have a conversation about both letters, right? Well, that didn't happen. So one, letter from a lawyer got posted on Facebook, and so the other town, their school board was upset because they thought they had agreed to wait and to hear. So there were different school board meetings, people were upset, kids were upset, wasn't sure what was going on. It was pitting one town against another within the context of sort of central office operations. I think had everybody maybe taken a step back, talked about the letter in a non-public session, said what are we going to do, develop a plan within the context of sort of the board as a whole. Remember, the board's the only one that can make the decisions, right? I think a lot of this confusion and chaos could have been avoided, and it put your administrator in the middle trying to manage 2 different boards that may have had different interests. Moving on, number 7, when attempting to restate what happened at a previous board meeting, clarify that the posting is not an official record of the board meeting and share information only from the open portions of the meeting. You're going to get those emails, and you're going to get posts from Facebook and other various means of social media. I heard X happened at the school board meeting last night. What really happened? And, you can say, well, we voted on this issue, and I voted yes, and here's why, or I voted no, and here's why. But also remind people that minutes will be provided in accordance with the right to know law, and that's really the official transcript, if you will, of the meeting. And minutes, we can debate whether or not minutes are always 100% accurate, but Principal?
Yeah, I have a question with respect to that.
Yep.
Relative to being informative. When I went to chairman school at the School Board Association LGC session,
Yep.
one of the things that inculcated into us was the fact that the legal record of the meeting is the physical minutes document,
Mhm.
not an audio and not a video record.
Correct.
So really, what transpires in the minutes themselves is the legal document that has to comply with right to know. Is that correct?
Yes, the final written record minutes as approved by the board is the official record of that meeting. That's what occurred at the meeting.
And so those minutes need to be posted within 5 days of the meeting.
They need to be made available within 5 days of the meeting. They don't necessarily need to be posted, but if somebody were to come in and request them, they need to be made available within 5 business days of the meeting.
Okay, so that's the fine point then.
Yeah,
As long as they are available.
correct. The board does not need to make an affirmative action of just putting them out there within 5 business days. It's not a bad practice, I'm not saying that. If you have the sort of staff resources to do that, that's fine. And some boards, I think, as a matter of practice, just do that. At least, they're marked draft or pending final approval by the board. But I interpret the right to know law as not obligating the board to take the affirmative action of necessarily posting them within 5 business. They will be made available for public inspection within 5 business.
So if anybody renders a request to see what the minutes were in 6 days,
Yeah.
then we have to provide
Yes.
whatever exists.
You have to provide whatever you have, yes.
And an audio recording is not an adequate fulfillment of that.
Interesting question. Yeah, I would probably say that I agree with that point, that you would need to provide them a document.
One of the reasons I asked the question was that for a while, we thought that because we were doing what we called next day audio,
Yeah.
meaning the day after the meeting, anybody who wanted to know what.
You could send them a link to the stream.
Right, or could listen to the audio.
Yeah.
And at LGC, I was told that that's not the legal record, and it does not comply with right to know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, you can certainly archive the audio or video recordings and maintain that if you'd like, but I think the minutes need to be reduced to writing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Number 8, and we're going to come back to this in a couple minutes as well too. Conduct yourself online in a manner that reflects well on the district. Avoid posting information that has not been verified and made public by the district, and never post anonymously about school district business. Despite what anybody might think, as soon as you hit submit or send or post, nothing is private. Nothing is private for a variety of reasons. Even if it's an email or a private message on Facebook, we call them private messages. Once you hit send, it's absolutely out of your control. And you no longer have the ability to keep that information within the school board or within your context of an individual, as an individual school board member. If I hit send and I send a private message or something, which I think is being held in confidence by my dearest, bestest friend who's never betrayed me, nothing stops them from making it public. And you get into confidentiality issues, you get into concerns about, as this says, half-truths. You get concerns about best practices in terms of boardmanship and basically conducting yourself in a manner that reflects well in the district. And we'll come back to that in a minute because I've got a great example that hit the news about 2 weeks ago. So perfect time. Maybe not for that one. Yeah. So there's always one, the best thing about this job is, there's a lot of pitfalls and a lot of hurdles that we have to get over. You know, somebody's always going to be the test case, right? Somebody's always going to be the test case, and let's just make sure it's not the board that I'm presenting to on any given evening. So. 9, immediately report harassing or defamatory communications to the superintendent if they involve school officials, staff, students, or district business. You can't control what other people are going to say in social media, Facebook, letters to the editor, whether it's the newspaper. But you can control what you post. Staff information, student information. I think a good rule of thumb or a good way to think about it is if the subject matter would properly be discussed in a non-public session, then you probably shouldn't be talking about it or commenting on social media. That seems like a reasonable way to move forward. 10, I don't really know if 10 is necessarily going to apply. Retain electronic records, including your own posts and content, others' posts to your account when required to do so by their district's records retention policy. Individual conversations among a member of the public and a school board member, I don't think invoke the public records definition of the right to know law. But getting back to sort of what we said at the beginning of the meeting, if you have a quorum of the board engaging in electronic communications, whether or not it's a blog, some blogs you can leave comments, and board members I know make blogs, just sort of their own concept of public outreach, if you will. Well, if it's a 5-member board and Joe board member has a blog and he writes down his comments, and Jane board member comments below that, and Bob board member comments below that, so if you've got a quorum of the board engaging in communications outside of the context of a meeting, a duly called meeting, it could be problematic. Immediately report to the district any potential security breach if you lose control or possession of a district issued or personal electronic device on which confidential district records could be accessed. I take it the district doesn't provide you with devices, but some districts, I think, maybe give their board members laptops or iPads to use at meetings. They certainly have, a lot of districts certainly have school district email accounts, which I guess would be subject to being hacked or invaded of some sort. So, 12, comply with the district's acceptable use policy when using district-issued devices or technology resources. I think we could even change that just as a best practice. That we have acceptable use policies for staff and students. You can't post obscene information, confidential, download illegal stuff. Even though it's your own private account, if we sort of operate within that sort of mind frame when we're online doing whatever we may be doing, I think we can avoid a lot of the problems that we might have or that we may encounter using social media. The second handout, again, put together by some of my colleagues at the New Jersey School Boards Association, a Facebook policy for board members. I thought about this when Stacy called me a couple of weeks ago and we set up this meeting or this conversation to talk about this issue. School board, NHSBA doesn't have a policy that speaks of school board member use of social media. And I thought about it, there's really a need for that policy. And I think if we look at some of our general roles and responsibilities policies and our general policies relative to board member conduct and board member communications and board members' obligations to keep things private and confidential. And I don't think there's a need for a policy. I think if we just, again, I've said this repeatedly, look at this within the context of what our general roles and responsibilities are and our best boardmanship practices, I don't think we need to invoke a policy, addressing or restricting school board member use of social media. And the other concern is that probably not really enforceable either. If I'm sitting at my own computer on my own time, attenuated.
But how do you reconcile freedom of speech,
right,
which is what you're talking about, with the discretion necessary to not violate the policy that when,
right,
It's implied that you're going to agree to it as an elected member of the board.
Here's what I say. We all enjoy freedom of speech privileges. Nothing stops you from going out, saying what you want to say, doing what you want to do, posting what you want to post. Everything you say may or may not have consequences, though, right? The owner of the basketball team that had was reported with all those races. Nobody's denying his right to say anything. Well, he's found out there are consequences to what you're going to say. I mean, that's an extreme example, obviously. And the consequences, from my perspective, you know, our job at NHSBA is to impart advice and training and recommendations to attempt to keep school boards out of trouble and to keep, you know, lawsuits at bay. You're free to say what you want to say, but there may be consequences if you're posting private, confidential information about students, about staff, disclosing things that are not public records or exempt from public disclosure, things of that nature. So, let's look at, I'll pass these out now. Has anybody caught wind of what happened in Cornish a couple weeks ago? No, okay, this will be new to everybody. This was the first one that hit the news. And this was the second one that hit the news a couple of days later.
So are you keeping the stuff?
Yeah.
The first one, Jim Kenyon, F blank blank blank, and feathered in Cornish. Look at the second paragraph that says, this being a family newspaper. I'll wait for them to get around. Sorry. Actually, I'll read the first two paragraphs. I suspect that school board member might have some explaining to do with the Cornish school board meeting Tuesday night. School board member who was elected to the board this past March has infuriated a bunch of folks in the town with a comment she posted last week on a friend's Facebook page. This being a family newspaper, I will refrain from repeating the word that board member used, so you'll need to fill in the blanks. Last Tuesday afternoon, this board member wrote, I met more blank 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 in one place last night than I have met collectively in my whole life. Brand new school board member, was on the school board about 2 months, just insulted the entire constituency. So, I'm sure she posted this thinking it was private. I'm sure she posted this not thinking anybody else was going to see it. Excuse me, I'm sure she posted this thinking that she was just having a conversation with a friend. So that's what was said on Facebook, and this was published in Sunday, May 23rd in the Valley newspaper. And jump to the next one, Wednesday, May 28th. Pandemonium erupted when the school board chair announced we would not allow public comment at the board's meeting, even as an audience of nearly 100 people demanded a chance to speak on the controversy surrounding a board member's social media post. Now, we certainly encourage constituents to come out to our school board meetings, see democracy in its most simplest, finest form. But I'm not sure this room could hold 100 people. And I'm not sure that the reason we want to draw 100 people out to a school board meeting is to address comments that were made on social media by a new school board member insulting various constituencies within the town. So, we can thank Cornish School Board for providing us this lesson of what not to do. But, you know, it happens, you know, and I'm sure this board has learned, I'm sure this board member has learned. So, you know, it happened, we moved forward, but the timing couldn't have been better on this example. So, that's sort of my general take on Facebook and social media. One other thing, I didn't bring this handout. I just brought one copy that I can certainly leave with you, Stacy. The other document that I have is available on our website. You don't need to log in or anything under the legal guide section. if your district wants to engage in social media, and there are plenty of benefits to it, advertising, you know, this young gentleman's presentation about DC, great way to advertise things that are going on within the district. Some superintendents, I don't think it's really going on in New Hampshire, but I've seen nationwide, some superintendents, instead of 5 years ago, they blog once a week or once a month. Now they tweet, you know, things that are going on. And, you know, let me ask you, how many people have a phone on them right now? Right? And how many people accessed that phone within, say, an hour of being awake, right? You know, that's how parents communicate and get their messages, Facebook and you know, you can get, and I know there are various, for things like school closings, like you can like text messages, services and things like that. So I don't want to say that you can't use social media, but if you're going to do it within the context of what the board wants to do. You know, different districts and different boards have set up Facebook pages and have set up Twitter accounts. And, you know, they use it for advertising, they use it to just display good school, you know, school district news, to advertise board meetings, to post minutes and things of that nature. So not to shy away from social media, it certainly can be done. It can be a quick, effective tool, but just be mindful that do it within the context of the school board.
Well, in that sense, it's nothing more than a website.
Exactly.
If you think of it, because social media really,
Climbed up on the chair.
in the context of what we think of it as,
Right.
is really a dialogue with other people.
Right, yeah. If we're using the phrase social media, it certainly does seem to imply a communication, if you will, back and forth.
Right, and therein lies the problem, I think, if you aren't careful.
Yeah.
I mean, even when you try to explain or clarify points that people are making that are completely off base, they're misconstrued, they
Right.
just misunderstood it, and that perpetuates on social media. And then when you try to stand up and say, wait a minute, that's not at all what was intended or what was meant or what happened,
Right.
then you engage in a dialogue.
Yeah.
And that's the risk.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Good point, well taken. What I try and advise boards, if we're looking at sort of the influx of electronic media, whether it's email communications among a board or whether it's, you know, the influx of social media into our lives, take the electronic aspect out of it and look at it in the context of, you know, what it may have been 20 years ago. People wrote letters to the editor of the newspaper 20 years ago, right? Were they always accurate? Did they always really capture the sense of the meeting? Did they always really capture the sense of what happened in any particular instance within the school district? No. Newspapers write editorials. Are they always accurate? No. But to a degree, we just kind of have to live with the misinformation at times. The problem and the frustrating part for boards and administrators is that, you know, you'd read an editorial on a Sunday newspaper and by Wednesday, people may have forgotten about it. Now, 8,000 people know about it within 3 minutes and kids access it and kids talk about it and parents come to school board meetings. And here's another story, speaking of social media. There was a contentious, this was with the district that I talked about within the SAU a few minutes ago. At the one board meeting, when the school board was taking some action that was not really pre-planned, was not on the agenda, there was a reporter, right, in the audience doing his or her job. This reporter happened to be friends in a personal sense with an individual on another school board. That was the second school board that was involved. The reporter took their phone out and sent a text and said, do you know what's going on at this school board meeting? So by 8 o'clock the next morning, you had students talking about it, you had staff talking about it, you had the superintendent trying to manage the situation. So, I mean, it's more, you know, I try and look at it, it's communication, whether or not that's written like we used to do, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, or it's a letter to the editor. It's just, the problem is it's quicker, we reach mass audiences. You can't always, I mean, you try and manage misinformation or bad information. You're never going to be able to control it completely. And at times that engaging back and forth, well, that's not what was said, or that's not what the minutes state, or that's not really sometimes that's even more detrimental than just sort of letting the issue go, you know? Go ahead.
That is, it's a tough one because
Absolutely.
when you know that what's being said is just outrageously
Right.
180 degrees from what you know to be the truth.
Sure.
You know, our kids are going to grow up to be school board members, and this digital communication is going to be a way of life for them.
Yeah.
So eventually, there's going to have to be some sort of incorporation of the medium. I mean, I remember 5 or 6 years ago when I wanted to use a computer at a school board meeting and have web access just for current information.
Right.
That was a big deal. I mean, you had to create a policy.
Yep, I remember.
From the school board
Yep.
association in order to allow that. But we're evolving, and I wonder if the board at some point will need to consider giving the superintendent the authority for one-to-many communication only.
Right.
Meaning clarifications on issues that are hot.
Sure. Sure.
And being readily misunderstood.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, the manner in which the board sort of wants to address misinformation, you know, can take on a variety of forms, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's on an agenda meeting, whether or not it's a district social media page that can be used to sort of quell rumors, if you will. Yeah, I mean, I think we're still, I mean, let's face it, the technology is changing faster than best practice, you know, and best practice, you know, often comes from, you know, from mistakes. You know, sometimes that's what happens. We need to see, well, let's let somebody else sort of develop the policy and procedures before we sort of jump in with both feet and see what works. So, no, I don't know how to address that other than to agree with you that say that when there's misinformation out there, it's you know it's not accurate. What is the board's responsibility or the administration's responsibility, and what's the responsibility to correct it, and two, what's the best method of correcting it? I don't always have an answer for that.
I think the real trick is to just not engage in dialogue. It's just got to be one-to-many.
Yeah.
That's my feeling.
Any other questions or comments or concerns, thoughts? Thank you again for having me. It's always nice to come here. I always appreciate the invitation. And you know, by all means, if you ever want me up again to talk on whatever topics the board, you know, has at issue, I'm always free to come on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming, Barry.
My pleasure.
It was good to see you. Take care.